but you came and pulled me up so I could breathe.
Welcome to Rescued for Women, where women share stories of how their messes were turned into messages of hope.
And all you did was forgive me.
Welcome back to Rescued for Women. We're so excited that you joined us again. Thanks for being with us. And Megan, thank you so much for sharing your story last
You're
night.
welcome.
You did such a great job just giving a story of hope. And I know we had, a lot of views. I think it was a lot.
For a week, it was amazing.
Sure.
It was amazing. Thank you for that. And the subscriptions, that was awesome.
Yes.
And the shares, all of it.
The subscriptions, the shares, the likes. We're so grateful for that because without you, we can't get the message across to the masses. And so we're relying on you guys to help us do that. And we hope that you were blessed by last week's video. And we're going to do another one now. So I guess it's my turn.
It is.
All right.
You have the show.
I do. Well, I'll get started and introduce myself and tell you a little bit about me. I am Julie Godwin, and I am the mother of 8. We're a blended family. One of my children is my stepson, and when my husband and I got married, I had one, and he had one. I had a girl, he had a boy. They were the same age, and we were one and done, but God had a different plan, and we had 6 more children together. So now we have a zoo, an official zoo. Yeah. So that's a little bit about me. I am the women's ministry coordinator at my church, and I am a speaker part-time. I like to do retreats, so that's who I am. And I want to tell you my story, my message of hope that started way back in the early years. So some of you probably know bits and pieces of this story, but for those who don't, I was raised in a Christian home. Megan, you know a lot of my story, especially after last week. We shared a little, but I was raised in a Christian home, and all my life I was taught that God was love and that he could bring joy and peace in any situation. And so from a very young age, I wanted what the Bible said Jesus had to offer. And it didn't take long, though. In time, I was raised in a really, really strict, very strict Christian home. So when I say very strict, it was legalistic. And legalistic is sort of like when there's a rule and you kind of add to it and make that rule a little bigger than what it should be. So an example would be that the scripture says, a woman should not wear that which pertains to a man, neither shall a man put on a woman's garment. And that's interpreted by my family as a girl shouldn't wear pants. So I know. So I grew up in a home where we didn't wear pants. We didn't do mixed swimming. We had to have our hair a certain way. And, it was just a lot of rules, a lot of no. And there were a lot of boundaries. Actually, the boundaries were set for me. And you just didn't cross them.
Deviate. Wow.
No. So I guess by the age of 12, I decided that I wasn't so sure that Jesus was for me. And that was a hard place to be for a 12-year-old. I remember how conflicted I was because there was a point in time, I think I was 14 years old, and I ran away from home to go to church because I had been grounded from church. Can you believe that? So there was rebellion.
What a place to be grounded from.
There was rebellion, but I'm not so sure that it was rebellion against the church, rebellion against God, as much as it was rebellion against rules, rebellion against structure. What I would call, the structure, the also what I would call maybe fake Christianity. So, I'm not saying that all of the people I grew up around were fake Christians. There were a lot of godly women in the church. My mom and dad, I truly believe that they loved the Lord with all their heart. They were doing the best job that they could. But for me, it just pushed me away from God instead of towards God. So growing up in that environment, growing up in a Christian home, in a Christian school, kindergarten through, first grade through 12th grade, I attended a Christian school. We had whole passages of scripture memorized. So, I have knowledge, had knowledge.
No wonder you're good at that.
Well, it's true. It's very much embedded in me.
Wow.
And so I guess around the age of 16, I was in full-blown rebellion. And, you know, I decided, you know, I didn't want really what they had. What I saw is this group of people that were joyless, boring. Like, I wanted to just go have fun. So I think I was 16 when my parents sent me to live with another family because I was so rebellious.
Wow.
They were hoping that being gone for the summer and removing me from all my friends would kind of get it out of me.
Yeah.
So it didn't really do the trick. It was fun to be there. I wanted to be there because actually their rules, even though I think they were a pretty strict family as well, I was just there having fun for the summer. So it was good to get out of the house. So fast forward, by the age of 18, I was full-blown agnostic. I believed in Jesus. Well, actually, I didn't believe in Jesus. I believed there was a higher power. I didn't believe necessarily that higher power was Jesus or that he was God in human flesh. And so I was kind of on this mission. I was seeking. I was trying to figure it all out. But what I was most interested in was partying.
But you were running away from everything that you were taught.
I was absolutely running the complete opposite direction from everything I knew, and I couldn't wait to just become who I thought I wanted to be.
Did you have any clue who you were?
No. I was a very, very broken young girl. And I say, you know, when you live a life where all the boundaries are set for you, and you turn 18 and you get out into the world, you have no idea how to even set a boundary.
And it's hard enough, 18. Like, you know what I mean? And then to pile that on top and not have, I don't think you ever know truly 100% who you are until, our age.
Right.
So 18 and going through everything that you have, that's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, it was. And I was just seeking, acceptance because I was a nerd. Wore glasses from a young age. I was the one that was teased and bullied. My parents were probably stricter than most of the parents in the church. So I would say, so much so that I remember they made me a Roaring 20s bathing suit. Look up a Roaring 20s bathing suit. So this is in the late 80s, and it's got bloomers down to the knees, puff sleeves with a little dress, and
I don't know, it might be in style today.
Oh, it might be. Well, you know what I did with that is I dressed up like a clown later in my and did parties for little kids. But that was, the girls in my school, they were allowed to wear normal bathing suits. They were allowed to do mixed swimming, and they were allowed to, have makeup and wear their hair however. And I would go to school in high school, and my friends would sneak me a pair of shorts or pants for, like, if we went to Hershey Park. And
now, what would have happened if your parents caught you?
Well, it's hard to say because they were spankers. So I stopped letting that happen at about the age of 13. I started to run and say, if you can catch me, maybe. My sister and brother were a little bit more compliant. So I think that's just that independent spirit in me. But, fast forward to 18, I remember just looking at my mom and saying, I always wanted to live for Jesus. But if that means being like you or the rest of the hypocrites in the church, I don't want any parts of it. And so I walked away and found the local friends who were more broken than I was. And, they were having parties and sex and drugs and alcohol. That was their everyday lifestyle. And I just dove right in. And I was so easily accepted by those people that I just stayed. And I would do anything and everything to earn their favor. I was kind of a talker, so I would just chatter on and on incessantly about stuff that nobody really cared to hear. I know that about myself now, but I wanted to be heard. I'd spent my whole life kind of being quiet.
Having to stay quiet.
Right. Not being allowed to have an opinion and, necessarily, I mean, I'm sure I could have, but if my opinion didn't line up with my parents' opinion, it wasn't worth saying.
Voice.
Yeah. So I was, this is exactly right. I was finding my voice. I was incredibly insecure. It took me not very long, less than a year, to find myself in a lot of trouble. So I made really bad choices. I choked up telling you last week, but I ended up facing federal charges for a crime that I committed, and I hurt a lot of people in the process of that. And so I've forgiven myself, God's forgiven me, but it's still emotional to talk about. But you never know, maybe you're out there and you've done something that was really hard for you to forgive yourself, and you don't know that God can forgive you. He can. I'm living proof of that.
We both are.
Yes.
It's self-forgiveness, to allow God to forgive you. That's the only way you can, I feel, move on from poor decisions, trauma, all of it.
Yeah.
It's the only way.
Yeah.
But man, that's a lot. To be that age and have literally overnight the pressure lifted, and now you're finding yourself in another, almost a snowball effect of trauma.
Yeah.
Future trauma now.
Sure.
Diving in.
Yeah. And so, you fast forward, and I decided at that point, what do? I ran back to the church because it's the only thing I knew. And I knew that the people in the church were at least staying out of jail.
Safe
right?
Place, yeah.
So if I could just follow their rules, like at least maybe I could not get arrested or, stay away from that kind of thing. But I was playing church. I was going to church every time the doors were opened. But the reality is I was as far away from God as, a lot of people are. I had no relationship with him whatsoever. I knew all the right lingo. I knew the right wording, but I was 100% a Christian atheist. Wow. And so I was dating a guy at the time, and I drug him along, and he would come to church with me, and he made a profession of faith, accepted Christ, but it was the same thing. He was living a life as a Christian atheist. I think that Craig Groeschel coined that term in his book, The Christian Atheist. I think I'm pronouncing his name wrong too, but
it's okay.
It's a great book to read. But that was me, just following all the rules, going to church.
I think it's a lot of people.
Yeah, I do too.
I mean, it was me too. I understand.
Right.
Don't feel. Julie often says this when you've tried the God thing,
right,
and it didn't work, and you've tried the God thing. Exactly what you're saying.
It's because that's what you're doing. You're trying. And God doesn't want you to try. He wants you to surrender so that he can take over. And when he does, it's a beautiful thing. But see, I didn't know that at the time. And I went through a situation where I was married. I got married very young, and it was really some poor advice, some poor pastoral advice, because I was living with this young guy, and we were living as if we were married. And so, coming from that conservative Christian background, we went to the pastor and said, hey, we want to get married. When he asked me to marry him, I was really unsure. I was kind of like, well, I've got a year to decide. But I was so insecure that I felt like if I say no to him, he's going to leave me, and I don't know if I can be alone. Wow. And so I said yes. I thought, well, I've got a year to back out if things don't look good. And we went to the pastor and said, would you marry us? We want to get married next year. The pastor said, sure. Well, I guess my grandmother told him we were living together. So the next week he said, I can't in good faith marry you unless he moves out and you get married on the next available Saturday. So 5 weeks later, we were married. And I understand the heart of the pastor. I understand the heart, and I think that today he would have given me very different advice. You live, you learn, but 5 weeks later we're married. A couple months after that, we had our first baby. Wow. So 9 months into that, everything looked so good. It's like we're still playing church, but we had like the perfect little dream.
And you're playing house.
And we're playing house, and he's, moving forward in his career. He was young. He was making a ton of money for somebody that was uneducated because he was incredibly smart. Wow. And so, we're ready to buy our first house eventually, and we have this baby, and we're kind of like just headed in the right direction. She's 9 months old, and things start to get a little weird, and I don't know what's going on. But I look at him one day and I say, what on earth is happening? Something's wrong with you. And he breaks down and tells me that he's begun taking drugs, and he's spirals into addiction faster than I can even explain. It was absolutely heartbreaking. Rehab after rehab. He totaled, I think, altogether 7 vehicles in a very short period of time. I was a stay-at-home mom, so he was the sole provider. And when he ended up with the addiction issue, I started getting turn-off notices for everything. Repossession papers on the vehicles,
That's so
turn-off
scary.
notices, eviction papers, and I'm going, whoa, what happened?
And you have a baby.
And I have a baby, and so I'm trying to figure all that out. And in my mind, I'm still playing church, and in my mind, leaving this man and divorcing this man is not an option, because if I divorce him, I'm really damned to, like I'm really doomed. Like,
it's such a scary word.
It is a scary word.
Can you touch on that? Just like women that have gone through that,
Sure.
how that feeling. I mean, we
Yeah.
both have gone through it, but like it is just touch on that.
Yeah.
You're very good to.
I absolutely didn't want the stigma that came with divorce. I couldn't even fathom telling my friends and family. And here's the truth. The reality is, I know deep in my heart, and I believe still to this day, that divorce is not God's ultimate plan for anybody's life.
I agree.
So
It gives me goosebumps.
and it's not because it brings yucky stuff, but I stayed in a really bad marriage for a really long time because I didn't think that I would be forgiven for it. I thought it was one of those sins that was unforgivable. The church doesn't really talk about it much, and the people who do get divorced seem to be
upon.
Yes, very much frowned upon. And again, I think if you can avoid divorce at any cost, oh my goodness, absolutely. And most marriages actually can be saved, but there are those extenuating circumstances, and I was in one of them because I couldn't fix him. He was,
But it wasn't your job.
It wasn't my job.
And we end up making it our job.
Right.
So.
And I thought it was for a long time, and I stayed, and I did really stupid things. I would get angry. I would throw things. I mean, things I'm not proud of. I remember picking up a coffee table and like breaking it over his head because I was just angry.
It changes you.
It really changes you. The distrust, there was infidelity, there was pornography, there was constant picking up the pieces. And so I didn't stay for a long time, but I didn't divorce him. So I kept trying. So I guess Kirsten was 4 years old, maybe almost 5 when I moved out. And we would still try, and he would go in and out of rehab. He really didn't want to stay in that addiction, but he just couldn't. He just couldn't break it. It had him. You're right. So when she was about 7 years old, I'll never forget, he had a really severe car accident, and it should have, for all intents and purposes, it should have taken his life. He broke so many bones in his body. He lost almost all of his blood and had to have transfusions like crazy. He was in shock trauma for 3 weeks. 3 solid weeks.
Oh my.
And then he was in a rehab center for like 3 months and learning how to walk again. And then when that was all over, and I stayed by his side because in my heart, I thought, this is it. God is going to get a hold of his heart and he's going to change. Now, mind you, I'm still a Christian atheist. I'm still playing church.
Oh, wow.
But I believe that God can change him. And,
this is it.
And so it was such a weird place to be, but I ended up letting him come live with us when he needed an at-home nurse after he got out of rehab. And when he came, I don't know how many months he was there, 6 months maybe, with an in-home nurse. The day the doctor said it's okay to drive again, he went out and got high. And I said, I'm done.
Oh my.
And I asked him to get out, and I made a decision then that I just couldn't do it anymore. Well, I remember like a week later, I drove down to Florida to see my sister, and the entire time I was in Florida, she had like Christian praise and worship music on, and things were just different down there in her home, and I was surrounded by godly things. So it wasn't just God on Sunday morning and Sunday and Wednesday night, it was like infiltrated with godliness. And something clicked in my heart on that trip, and I left her house to drive home to Maryland, and I remember turning on the radio, and I was fiddling for Christian music, and I thought, what
am I doing?
This isn't like me. Like normally I just have, the top 40 whatever on and be singing, at the time, Britney Spears,
right.
I know, a long time ago. But I I was driving down the road and I had turned the Christian radio on, and I remember the moment where I just lost it.
Wow.
And I laid down my life. I cried out to Jesus and I said, Lord, I can't do it anymore.
It was too heavy.
I can't. I need you. I need you to be the Lord of my life, and I need you to take the reins. And I'm done trying to be a Christian. I am done trying to be something I can't be. I can't follow the rules. I can't be the good girl. I just need and want you. And that's, you know, in that moment, driving up Interstate 95 from Florida to Maryland, I gave my heart to him.
But at that moment, the peace that you won't forget that moment.
I will never, ever, ever forget the moment. Because that peace, and we talked about this with your story, the peace that passes all understanding, it washed over me. And I was never the same again. God transformed me. I used to be the biggest liar. I was a thief. I was insecure like crazy. I mean, to think that I could stand in front of thousands of women now and speak is God and God alone.
Can you speak on insecurity, what that looked like for you? Just
Sure.
a visual, because I do think women and men, but women specifically, we internalize that in a different way.
Yeah, and there's a lot of reasons that girls are insecure, even girls that have no reason to be insecure. So, you know my upbringing a little. One thing I didn't mention and hadn't talked about until very recent years was that there was sexual abuse when I was a child by a family member. So I had that going on.
Yeah.
And, you know, so you add that into the mix, and you have, I mean, I looked in the mirror and I saw ugly inside and out. And I felt like I didn't have anything to offer this world. And so I think that kind of encapsulates it. Like, I just, every time I would go somewhere, I'd think, well, that was stupid to say. I'd beat myself up. All the time. I would leave a party, a gathering, even church, and think, well, what did I say that for? And I'd replay conversations in my head. And you know, I'm thinking all these thoughts in my mind. Well, the person that I was talking to probably went home thinking the same thing about them. They didn't even think twice about what I had said, you know, because we're a little bit self-absorbed, and really insecurity comes from that place of thinking inward
and not
outward.
Right.
And when you get out of your own head and start thinking of others, which is totally biblical. And like, I want to talk about that too, because my entire life I felt like, what is this? The Bible has all these rules. I can never follow them. And I thought they were just rules. Well, it wasn't until I gave my heart to Jesus and had a desire to learn about him and know him that I realized every single rule in Scripture was designed for my good.
It's like a guideline of goodness.
Yes.
It really is.
Yes, and it's not about, you know, I thought, oh, you can't smoke, you can't drink, you can't do this, you can't do that. Well, and again, sometimes I think that even the can't drink thing was a touch of legalism, because the Bible says not to be drunk with wine. And now I will have a drink now and again, and that is not a problem for me, but I'm not going to go out to a bar and get drunk, you know?
100%.
And so that's, you know, one piece of it, but God does transform us. You know, I think about smoking. When I came home from that trip to Florida, I was a smoker. I smoked at least a pack a day.
Oh, wow.
And I was working in a restaurant in the cocktail bar portion of that restaurant.
So the environment.
There's smoking all the time. And, you know, this is back in the 90s, so it was prevalent. And I remember having a conversation with God on the way to work that day. And I said, Lord, I know that smoking is bad for my body, and you don't want me to do this, but I enjoy smoking. So God, if you want it out of my life, you have to take it from me, because I can't do it without you. And so that night I went to that bar, and I, after my shift, out of nothing more than sheer habit, lit up a cigarette, took one drag off of that cigarette, and I went in the bathroom and puked, and I have never touched another cigarette again. So he can do miraculous things. He transformed me into a woman who is honest and truthful. I am a teacher of truth, and I, you know, he changed my life completely and totally, and gave me peace. So the thing is, he transformed me, but my circumstances didn't change that day. Like, I didn't come home from Florida and, oh, Now Carl is not an addict anymore. No, I still had to deal with that. And I had certain situations where that were really ugly. I think I shared with you last week the one incident where he broke into my home late at night and I heard some noise. I came out into my office. I find him naked in a puddle of his own vomit. And I have to call the police and we go through all this yuck. But the next day I'm up making bacon and eggs, listening to praise and praise music on the radio.
You had peace.
I'm okay. I had peace and joy, and I wasn't crumbling and I wasn't falling apart because at this point, God had it. I had given every single piece to him.
Yeah.
And you fast forward a few years later, and he didn't get sober until we got divorced.
Wow.
And when we did get divorced, and it's interesting that when I gave my life to Jesus, even though I know God does not condone divorce, I felt as though the chains were lifted and I had the freedom to go. It's almost like God said, Julie, this is not my ultimate plan for you, but I am not somebody that wants you in bondage. I came to free you from bondage, to free you from chains, to free you from the rules and the regulations. And I've got you no matter what decision you make. And so we did end up divorcing. And he did get sober for 3 years, which gave him a great opportunity to get to know his daughter. And then he began relapsing. And ultimately, the use of drugs and alcohol took his life.
And how old was Kirsten?
Kirsten was 16 years old. And unfortunately, there were no drugs and alcohol found in his system at the time of death. It was.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
It was truly, his heart just stopped. And I think it was the years of abuse. And for me as a mom, moms, if you're out there and you ever have to sit your child down and tell them that their daddy died, whew, tough stuff.
But I have like awful goosebumps, but it's life.
It's life.
And I know a ton of the women who have reached out to us have experienced that. I don't know what I can't fathom. I'm very close with Kirsten, Julie's daughter, and she has expressed to me, how that felt. I can't fathom the conversation as a mother, what your heart went through during that. I just can't.
Well, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done, but there was a peace. I don't know how I would have done that without God. I didn't fall apart. Sure, there's tears, because it was a painful thing to do.
Of course.
But there wasn't a brokenness. I just don't know how to describe the peace and the security that I felt walking through all that. So I would just say that, like I said, if you're out there and you have tough situations, when God's in it and God's got it, you're okay.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing that you
no matter
can't,
what the outcome.
No matter what the outcome.
Wow.
So that's pretty much my story, and of course, there's more of the story I'm not going to share tonight. But, because I've got this another whole beautiful part of the story.
Yes.
God has given me a wonderful, amazing family, and one day I'll share about that. But I think the message for everyone listening, there's a couple things I'd want to touch on. Maybe you're a mom that has children who have walked away from the faith. Maybe you blame yourself. Don't blame yourself. You can't blame yourself. You could have done everything wrong, but at the end of the day, the Bible says that God's word will not return void. You have to trust God for those promises, and you have to just give them to God, because I will say this about that part of things. One of the things that really pushed me further away from God is that my sin and my wrongdoing and my rebellion made the people that loved me really fall apart, and I thought, well, nothing's holding you together. Like, why would I want your God? He can't even hold you together when I tell a lie.
So I don't want what you have.
Right, like and I don't mean that disrespectfully.
No,
I get it. I understand how women do that. But I'm just saying, moms, if you are in that situation, pick yourself up, find the joy of the Lord. Maybe you need to give your heart fully and totally to Him so you can find that joy and live it out and make your children want what you have,
100%, whether you're a single mom, a married mom, it's so important. I feel like so many people look at that as, I have to be an independent woman. It's not us losing our independence when we're mothers, but it's a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And the picture of what we portray, our children are watching, but I think we end up almost taking their actions and their decisions and making them our own. Like you said, you couldn't fix him. It wasn't your job to fix him.
No.
It's your job to fix you and get you right. But we end up having that pressure.
Yeah.
And their decisions, what did we do wrong?
What
could we have done right? You can't live that way.
No, I spoke at a ladies' retreat last year. Well, maybe it's been almost 2 years now, and the whole, it was living a life that leaves a legacy. And the whole thing that I said over and over again is you are not responsible for your children's choices, and your children's choices, your husband's choices, your family's choices, your friends' choices, they don't define you.
They are theirs.
Only you can be defined by your choices and Christ. Christ has already defined us.
I 100% agree with you. That was the most peace I think both of us we've talked about that. That was the only moment when we found finally peace, when those choices are not ours to own.
Yeah.
So it's okay to let them go.
Yeah.
Let those choices of others go, because you can't hold on to that.
You can't. So that's the gist. That's the beginning of my story.
There's so much more.
There's so many things that we go through in life, and I know Megan has them, and one time we'll come back on and share more, because there's things you go through in life that are our messes, that are messages of hope. Because this message of hope is the beginning of our journey spiritually. But there's so many more messages of hope
just getting started.
in the journey. Exactly. So thank you so much for staying and listening. And
it was a wonderful story.
Thank you. So we want to hear yours.
Yes.
That's important. If you have any questions for Megan or I, just reach out to rescued4women@gmail.com, and we will try to get back to you quickly. Please do us a favor and hit the subscribe button, the like button, and share it, because you never know how these stories can impact the people in your world. So share it and give it a thumbs up when you share it, so that they'll actually listen to it. So we appreciate you, and we care. So if you need prayer or you want to share, let us know.
Have a good night.
I was drowning in the water, but you came and pulled me up so I could breathe. I was hurting with all my problems, and all you did was forgive me, 'cause I